Republicans have to talk about it, Laura.
And does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent.
We have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people.
No, you don't. No, you don't. Oof. 6 words that may have just ended the MAGA train. Donald Trump, a guy who campaigned repeatedly on the opposite, is now saying, nope, we cannot do it without immigration. Don't take my word for it. Here's Donald Trump on the campaign trail many, many moons ago when he still actually believed in putting America first.
Well, first of all, I think, and I know the H-1B very well, and it's something that I frankly use, and I shouldn't be allowed to use. We shouldn't have it. Very, very bad for workers. And second of all, I think it's very important to say, well, I'm a businessman, and I have to do what I have to do, and it's sitting there waiting for you, but it's very bad. It's very bad for business in terms of, it's very bad for our workers, and it's unfair for our workers, and we should end it.
So campaign Donald Trump. H-1Bs are a scam, and they're basically being taken advantage of by corporations to try and undercut the wages of the domestic population. And then President Donald Trump in 2025 saying, we don't have talented people here that can do these jobs. You cannot possibly take an American kid and train him on how to make batteries the way the South Koreans do.
You don't. No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put
How did we ever do it before?
Well,
I'll
give you an example. In Georgia, they raided because they wanted illegal immigrants out. They had people from South Korea that made batteries all their lives. You know, making batteries are very complicated. It's not an easy thing. It's very dangerous. A lot of explosions, a lot of problems. They had like 500 or 600 people, early stages, to make batteries and to teach people how to do it. Well, they wanted them to get out of the country. You're going to need that, Laura. I mean, I know you and I disagree on this. You can't just say, take people off an unemployment line who haven't worked in 5 years, and they're going to start making missiles. It doesn't work that way.
All right. Well, aside from the fact that that's just patently false, and aside from the fact that, like, the university system in America, despite all of its flaws, actually does produce kids that are capable of doing a lot of things, even if you just assume for a second that the university system does not do those things, it does not prepare anybody to do anything of value, which oftentimes that is true, well, then how about you actually take a holistic approach to this? How about you actually do something to help these kids? How about you acknowledge the fact that the printing and borrowing and spending that you did in your first term ultimately destroyed the dollar and made it extraordinarily challenging for these kids to get ahead? How about you acknowledge the fact that the lockdown era and the forced social distancing and the masking for kids while they were in high school, in the most important formative years of their life, or younger for that matter, they were essentially tormented by some of your policies? How about you acknowledge that? How about you acknowledge the fact that the DEI environment completely destroyed the education system and made it so that professors were ultimately just demeaning all of the men in their class, or all of the boys, I should say, and just breaking their spirits? And now you expect them to just bounce back after that in the Me Too environment and cancel culture, and then being put through lockdowns, and then put through the most progressive garbage education system you can imagine, and then you go, they can't build batteries. Okay, whose fault is that, though? Look, I'm not saying that the state is required to make us capable of doing anything. Quite the contrary. I'm arguing quite specifically the inverse of that the state has hindered the development of these children. And now, instead of acknowledging the damage done by not just Donald Trump, but every politician in our lifetimes, instead he goes the opposite direction and he says, well, they're useless. They can't actually accomplish any of these things. So we're going to replace them with immigrants via H-1Bs or otherwise. In what world is that America first? In what world is that making America great again? It comes across much more obviously to be an appeal to your donors, to the special interests that clearly run your White House and run you. And I think that's what your base is reflecting on and realizing and coming to terms with, is that you're a fraud, that what brought you to power is not what keeps you in power, that the people that keep you in power don't want to focus on actually remedying any of the issues that have plagued young people in this country, but instead to replace them entirely, which is, in effect, very little difference from what the Joe Biden or Kamala Harris presidency would have delivered for them. So when you see your poll numbers tanking, just remember, it's not us that abandoned you, it's you that abandoned us.
The Trump administration seems to have been hiding these emails. They're not good. Okay, they are completely indefensible, but I already told you, I was done with MAGA at the moment he looked us in the face and he said, what files, right? What are we still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? Pam Bondi said it was a Democrat hoax. No, I think the entire nation has been hoaxed by Republicans and Democrats, and there are a pervert elite that sit at the top.
And you can point to many different dates throughout the past couple months that would probably be good indications that the Trump train was totally off the rails. For me, the most obvious date or the inflection point that really jumps to mind was July 8th, when this happened.
And released yesterday on Jeffrey Epstein, it left some lingering mysteries. One of the biggest ones is whether he ever worked for a American or foreign intelligence agency. The former labor secretary, who was Miami U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, he allegedly said that he did work for an intelligence agency. So could you resolve whether or not he did? And also, could you say why there was a minute missing from the jailhouse tape on the night of the staff?
Yeah, sure. If
Hey, Pam, could I just interrupt for 1 second? Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable. Do you want to waste the time, and do you feel like answering?
I don't mind answering.
I mean, I can't believe you're asking a question on Epstein at a time like this where we're having some of the greatest success.
Are we still talking about Epstein? Still? I mean, you can answer the question if you want, but like, are we really? Haven't we moved on? That creep? No, actually, we haven't moved on. And particularly given that your entire cabinet is filled with people that they promised disclosures and justice in that arena, we're not going to move on, including yourself. So I don't even know why that's so beyond the pale.
The evidence we have in our files clearly indicates that it was, in fact, a suicide.
We released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive.
That Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
But that was kind of the moment where I started to realize that there's something deeply, deeply wrong here. Now, I'm not going to pretend as if I was the first person to realize that. A lot of people, including Nick Fuentes, identified this before Trump was elected president for a second time, and I stand corrected. They were right. They got it right. Donald Trump was, in fact, compromised, and I think he was compromised by his donors. Elon Musk also got it right, it looks like to me, when he started to point out that the Epstein files are being buried because of Donald Trump's relationship to him. Now, I've never claimed, and I don't know for a fact as to whether or not Trump did anything illegal in the Epstein network operation thing. But what I do know is that thanks to Dropsite News over the past few weeks, they've been doing incredible work thanks to this email leak of, I think it was Ehud Barak's emails that got put online. No other corporate journalist is doing this deep diving, of course, because they are all essentially forbidden from doing so, I guess. But Dropsite News has been all over this, and God bless them for it. What they've proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt in my mind, is that Jeffrey Epstein was, in fact, an Israeli asset. And this is evidenced by the fact that he had intelligence agents that were staying at his property in Manhattan repeatedly. These are Israeli intelligence agents. They also had the former prime minister of Israel, who was in constant communication with Jeffrey Epstein and stayed with him 36 times over a few-year period, which is more often than I see my own family. I find that utterly bizarre. So, yeah, to believe that he wasn't at least an asset of Israel, I think is totally ridiculous. So then you have to connect some dots, and this is where it gets uncomfortable for those that are tinfoil averse. But the obvious dots to connect is that Donald Trump is funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars by pro-Israel donors. Also, those same donors are responsible for the primary campaign against Thomas Massie. Why would they be so opposed to Thomas Massie? Well, Thomas Massie is the one who's responsible today for having passed the bill that is essentially going to force a vote as to whether or not to release the Epstein files. So why is it that these pro-Israel donors are so deeply concerned about the disclosures of the Epstein files? Could it be that, in fact, Jeffrey Epstein was an Israeli asset, that he was, in fact, building compromat files against the rich and powerful, both in politics and corporate America? I would argue that the preponderance of evidence says yes, that's exactly what his role was. Not to say that he didn't have other roles. He was also a major financial wheeler and dealer in the gray and black market. I think he did that on behalf of multiple state intelligence agencies, including Israel, as well as our own, probably the UK, our MI6, and also arguably the French. So he's a jack of all trades. So he was serving a lot of purposes. But why is Donald Trump, who is being smeared as having participated in this underage sex trafficking operation, why would he not want full disclosure, particularly if he's innocent? Well, the obvious answer would be that his donors want those disclosures not to be made. And as a consequence, Donald Trump is unwilling to do what's right, to do what he promised to do, which is to be transparent. So I think that's the obvious dot connection there, is that, in fact, this intelligence operation is being buried by the sitting president of the United States because of his donors. It could be argued that there's additional pressure being levied against him, be that violent, financial, or otherwise. I can't say definitively why. All I know is that Donald Trump is lying. Donald Trump is covering up. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are doing the same, despite promises to the contrary when they were trying to get in positions of power. Now that they sit in those positions of power, they say there's no there there. Why is there no there there? Dan? Kash? And if there is no there there, why is it not your job to present me the there? Could you give me the there? I guess not. So my answer for all of this at this junction, because I think it's the most logical conclusion to come to, is that the entire Trump administration is essentially under the thumb of a foreign government or foreign intelligence agency. And tragically, that has resulted in a tremendous amount of injustice to the American people. And then you wonder why Tucker Carlson has flipped against Israel.
You want people to follow you? You want to sell your ideas to them? You want to convince them that what you're saying is true? Show some love for them. Demonstrate that you love them. You care about them. Why are we doing this? Because we think it's better for you. Shapiro and all of these guys, they don't make an effort to do that because they don't feel that way at all. Shut up, cattle. You're a Nazi. Give us the money for our preferred little country, or else we're going to denounce you. Man, those attitudes are incompatible with leadership. I really care so much about this thing, and you better care about it too, or else I'm going to attack you and deplatform you. It doesn't work. It's illegitimate, actually. And if you keep it up, you're flirting with, real backlash, like a real one. Not Nick Fuentes, like a real one. So cool it. Listen to other people. Don't treat them like cattle. Treat them like human beings.
Or you wonder why Nick Fuentes has grown in prominence. Well, it's because we have eyes and we have ears and we pay attention and we know that something is awry. Something is wrong here.
What we want is for someone to unashamedly and single-mindedly advocate for Americans and Americans only. We want someone to say, the only thing I care about is helping Americans. The only people I care about in the world are Americans. And we don't want to just hear that, but we want to see the action taken as well. I've seen some people on social media say, hey, it's America first, but not America only. I disagree. I think it is America only.
Something is totally counter to what our expectations were and to what your promises were, and you are failing egregiously. Just yesterday, he also promised that he would be bringing in Chinese students to fill our university systems on an annual basis. That is no small figure.
Folks are not thrilled about this idea of hundreds of thousands of foreign students in the United States. We have about 350,000 Chinese. One point during COVID, you were going to, push to, get them out, but that was pulled back. You've said as many as 600,000 Chinese students could come to the United States. Why, sir, is that a pro-MAGA position when so many American kids want to go to school and there are places not for them and these universities are getting rich off Chinese money?
Sure. Never said about China, but we do have a lot of people coming in from China. We always have, China and other countries. We also have a massive system of colleges and universities. And if we were to cut that in half, which perhaps makes some people happy, you would have half the colleges in the United States go out of business.
So what?
Well, I think that's a big deal.
Why would he do that? Well, because he says otherwise the collegiate system in America would collapse. To which I say, good. Since when are we in the business of defending academia? Academia, which has destroyed the minds of young people across this country for decades now. Why would we possibly be doing so? Why would we possibly be doing anything to keep them afloat? Much less if China is our enemy, our top enemy, according to Trump and many other people that talk about China as if that's a fact. Why would we be bringing in over 500,000 of their kids every year to study at our universities? And moreover, how is it making America great again to essentially replace the American domestic population that wants to go to those universities but no longer can because those seats are being filled by foreigners? Here's another uncomfortable dot to connect, but many people are now theorizing that perhaps the 600,000 Chinese students being allowed into our country, perhaps that was the carrot that was dangled or the trade that was made in order to get China to allow for the ByteDance or TikTok sale to the Israeli side. But regardless, does that possibly mean that we are putting America first? I don't see how you can make that argument. Certainly not. You're not putting American students first. That's for sure. Okay, well then how about the J6 justice, seeing as you had a couple hundred plainclothes police officers that were in the crowd on J6? How about the fact that we now have pretty damn good evidence through that gate analysis from the Blaze that it looks as if the FBI pulled Kyle Seraphin and his surveillance team off of the J5 pipe bomber, the guy who, or gal actually, who was what it appears to be framing the J6ers as terrorists, assuming that they did not get catalyzed into rioting and storming the Capitol, which they did. So I guess you didn't have to blow up that bomb. So aside from the pardons for the J6ers, we're not really getting justice when it comes to the entrapment scheme that they fell victim to. Shouldn't people be put in prison for doing that? I would say definitely. How about there being peace in Ukraine? Nope, not that either. Another campaign promise that has fallen flat. Got no Epstein disclosures. You got 600,000 Chinese students, maximum H-1Bs, and I guess we can now take out a 50-year mortgage to buy a starter home for $750,000, assuming I don't get deported for anti-Semitism. So yeah, if you rattle off this entire list and then you come to the conclusion that we're abandoning Donald Trump, I don't think you remember at all what he campaigned on. He campaigned in opposition to everything I just detailed. So when I say that MAGA is not divided, MAGA is dead, I don't think I'm overstating it. In fact, one might argue I'm late to the game, that it fell apart many months ago. And that's sad, because I thought that the coalition that Donald Trump put together was one of the most remarkable things I have ever seen in my life of covering politics. To have the entire MAGA alliance, which was obviously the America First camp, the non-interventionist, but also more nativistic, nationalistic side of the conservative wing. You get the Make America Healthy Again, the RFK Juniors, the people that realize that our food supply is largely toxic and our diets are atrocious and pharma is a huge problem and in fact not a solution in many regards. That was an incredible part of the alliance. Then you bring in the libertarians and the non-interventionists and the actual truly America First people like myself. And we're like, okay, this is an interesting alliance. This is actually building to something. You got Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a young upstart, who's got some impressive rhetoric and seems that he may be on our side of the fence too. And then you bring in a whole bunch of other people, Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard, and it starts to look like, wow, this is a dream team. This is Brett Weinstein's of the world. We're actually putting together an Avengers of sorts to try and save the country. And it felt good. And there was hope for a time. Genuinely, I felt like there was a chance. I wasn't overly optimistic, but it did seem, given the atrocious political establishment that existed prior, this seemed like a huge improvement and an opportunity worth taking, essentially. Donald Trump gets inaugurated, and suddenly the bait and switch becomes more and more obvious. And it's been 10 months now, and essentially he's delivered on nothing aside from securing the border. So I'll give him credit for that. I was expecting a bit more, just a tad bit more. And apparently that makes me a panican, and that makes me a hater and whatever. I'm not really interested in the smears. I don't really care. We don't have time. We don't have time to allow for our political establishment, the political elites, to lie to us any longer. We cannot be bait and switched anymore. We cannot allow for the domestic population to continue to be replaced, which is clearly the plan underneath the Trump administration, just as it was under former administrations. It's egregious. It's deceptive. It's disgusting. And if you want to try and take the wind out of the sails of one Nick Fuentes, you're going to have to stop. You're going to have to stop doing these things. And you're not. You're going full speed ahead. In fact, you're saying repeatedly that you do not need the support of anybody who wants justice when it comes to the Epstein files. Well, then, when I don't offer you my support anymore, don't get mad. You told me not to. I said, okay. Simultaneously, we have the FBI lying repeatedly when it comes to the Charlie Kirk case and getting tons of things wrong, including in the very first day or two where they said that they had the guy in custody and then immediately backpedaled and said, no, we don't. And now they say that they do. And they also say that he worked alone. And they say that if you're digging at all, that you're ultimately an anarchist and a danger to the country. While simultaneously, Kash Patel, the head of the FBI's girlfriend, is suing my buddy Elijah Schaffer and others for apparently claiming that she's some sort of honeypot, which I have never made that claim, and I have no reason to believe it. I have no idea. I hope that you and Kash have a great life together. I just really wish that Kash Patel would do his fucking job. That would be great. So under the Biden administration, you got Alex Jones being hit with billion-dollar fines, and then under the Trump administration, you got Elijah Schaffer and Sam Parker getting hit with $5 million lawsuits. All right. I guess things are kind of not changing very much. But it's not all negative news. There's some really good things. For instance, Donald Trump sent a letter yesterday to the president of Israel, Mr. Herzog, to ask or implore him to pardon Bibi Netanyahu. So at least we got that on our side. That was a bucket list item. That was a box to be checked when Donald Trump was campaigning, right? That he would try and get Bibi Netanyahu pardoned, because that makes America great again. But probably more than anything, the reason that Donald Trump was so beloved is that it became more and more apparent to all of us that the political elite literally hated us. They thought that we were just garbage, from Hillary Clinton calling us a basket of deplorables and just the description of us being flyover country and whatever. It was just obvious that the liberal elites in particular really had a deep hatred for the American people. So you got Donald Trump now, who's obviously the remedy to that. And then when asked, don't we have plenty of talented people to get these jobs done? And Donald Trump responds very bluntly, no, you don't. No, you don't. Add to this the fact that the unemployment rate for recent college graduates is now higher today than it was in 2008 and 9, at the height of the Great Recession. These kids are being replaced not just by immigrants, which obviously the immigrant flood has declined this year, thank goodness, but also by artificial intelligence. This is a tsunami headed our way. This is going to be a catastrophe of the highest order. And nobody is preparing for it. Nobody is being honest about it. Nobody is giving these kids guidance on how they might ride the wave of the tsunami, if anything, so that they don't drown underneath it. It's a huge, huge problem. And the only people speaking to their concerns are Thomas Massie, MTG, Tucker Carlson. These are the people that actually seem to understand the problems that the young people are facing. And as long as you ignore them, you're going to radicalize them further. We do have plenty of talented people in this country. All of the damage done to these kids can and must be undone. We must remedy what ails them. These are our countrymen. These are our children. These are the people that we should put as a priority. If America First means anything, it must mean that. And if you cannot deliver on that, then you should resign or you should be impeached. And I might add that in the midterms coming up just a year from now, you're going to get shellacked. You're going to lose the House. And as soon as that next Congress is admitted, you're going to be impeached most likely. And when you are, I want to be very clear. I and millions of other Americans who defended you during the nonsensical Russian collusion hoax and that entire impeachment charade will not be coming to your defense. You have opted to go with your donors over your voters. And we're going to find out if the donors can keep you safe when the establishment comes for you once again, which they inevitably will. The American people that are paying attention, at least, are not going to have your back because you didn't have ours. And that's really as simple as it gets. So seeing as you've decided to bait and switch us and condescend to us and ultimately try and replace us, don't be surprised when you get replaced yourself. It's going to happen. Your presidential term will come to an end inevitably, and you're not going to be able to get anything accomplished because the Democrats are going to control the House, probably the Senate, and your legacy will have gone up in smoke. And it's all your fault because all you had to do was deliver on what you promised. You didn't have to pull off miracles. You just had to be courageous. You didn't have to really do anything hyper dangerous other than do what you said. And you would have had the American people backing you to the end of the earth. You already have such a tremendous fan base, some truly ride or die, beautiful people that want nothing more than this country to be made great again. And that is why they got behind you. And then you decided to step on them. And that's sad. And more than that, it's infuriating. And it just demonstrates that you don't have the courage. And I don't know that it's necessarily your honest feelings. It's a distinct possibility that you have been compromised, that you're being threatened financially or physically. I don't know which. Or maybe there's other avenues of attack that I'm not considering. Maybe there's threats against your family. There's lots of angles that could justify why you're being such an unbelievable bitch and liar right now. But it doesn't change the fact that you're being a bitch and a liar right now. And therefore, as a truth teller, I have no choice but to call you out for it. Donald Trump, you are failing. You are failing as a president in your second term. I had such high hopes because you were impeached over garbage, because the media tried to destroy you, because the FBI tried to destroy you, because the entire political establishment tried to destroy you. I had to believe that there was a chance, just a small fraction of a chance, that you were the real deal, that you were actually interested in putting Americans first and essentially ending the empire. You're not that guy. You don't have the courage to do so. And J.D. Vance, your vice president, doesn't have the courage to say that you're failing. So he's also not the solution. We're going to have to find somebody else. To me, the obvious options are Thomas Massie and MTG. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's the presidential ticket that I'll be pushing for. And I hope that you'll support me in that, because I think that's our only hope at this junction, aside from looking after our families, trying to remedy what the state can't, and really looking out for our communities, our kids, trying to get them in front of this AI wave. Believe me when I tell you, it's already upon us, and it's going to grow exponentially. So this is urgent times, and political solutions are looking increasingly fleeting, unfortunately. So it's up to us now. It's up to this ragtag group of misfits on the internet that are simultaneously trying to save the country as well as solve the Charlie Kirk murder. We got a lot on our plate, but we also have no choice but to prevail. So prevail we shall. You cannot break our spirits. Even when you lie to us, Donnie, we're still gonna keep forging ahead. We have no other choice. All right, let's get into this brief debate I had with my good friend, the economist Bob Murphy. He was being very polite and chastising me slightly for aligning my messaging with one Nick Fuentes. I stand by how I have been messaging that and making the distinctions between the two of us known, while also echoing the sentiments that I think he has completely 100% correct. And I will continue to do so, but because Bob put together an hour compilation essentially explaining his hypothesis as to why I should not be doing so, essentially that it makes it very hard for people to distinguish between the identitarian America First movement versus the non-interventionist, libertarian, individualist America First movement. I am not so much interested in, making that the focus of how I talk about these things. I think that we don't have the numbers for purity spiraling games. We have very little time, and we need people to actually come together to work on these things. So I will continue to do so, even when we have areas of disagreement. If you want to put America first, you're an ally. That's how I view it. It's very simple. You might want to push for socialism. We'll debate that after we end the empire and focus on Americans. Okay? How about that? So enjoy this very friendly debate that I had with Bob Murphy. If you want to support the work, at Liberty Lock Pod on X, subscribe there. I'll follow you back, or at libertylockdown.locals.com, or go over to mypillow.com and use promo code LOCKDOWN to get yourself some cozy and be swell like Mike Lindell. mypillow.com, promo code LOCKDOWN. Please do hit the like button, comment, share it around, and I will catch you soon with the next one. I am joined today by the only libertarian with more hair than me. Just kidding. You took a dig at my baldness, so I got to fire back at your illustrious locks. We got Bob Murphy on today. He put out a very thoughtful video last night that I took the time to watch, and I thought it was a fair criticism. I obviously have some disagreements, given that I am the one that's basically the messaging subject of the topic at hand. But I wanted to give you a couple minutes just to explain your position, and I'll give you my 2 cents.
Okay, sure. And I appreciate you having me on here. And to clarify, folks, I said that Clint is a tough guy because he has, he went completely bald. So that was the point of that. I wasn't taking a dig. I was saying he can handle this criticism.
For sure.
And also, I should say, as a disclaimer, I only picked your tweets, Clint, or your messaging just so people would have something specific in mind, right? So I wasn't just speaking in general. I was like, Bob,
Sure.
what are you talking about? Give us something. So my concern with our sides, and I say that without irony, like I really do consider like you and Dave Smith and, Glenn Greenwald on this issue, we're all, on the same side of this stuff. My concern is the way that we respond to Ben Shapiro and like Mark Levin, like their smear tactics, that I'm concerned that we're giving them almost too much credit, or we're giving them an unnecessary way that they can appeal to the people they're trying to reach. And so specifically, I think that I was trying to think of the best way I can get this across to your audience very succinctly. So think back to when like Daryl Cooper was on Tucker's show, right? And he had that now infamous thing where he said,
Chief villain.
I think the case that Winston to be the chief villain. And so, of course, everyone's running around, oh my gosh, he's a Holocaust denier and he loves Hitler and da-da-da. And so, and I went out and I did an entire episode of my show going through and showing, no, you're misunderstanding. That's not what he was saying. And then back, before my time, but when Pat Buchanan came out with his book on the unnecessary war, again, anti-Semite, you love Nazis, da-da-da, and the anti-war crowd, no, that's not what he was saying. Da-da-da. So my concern is when Tucker has, Nick Fuentes on, and then Ben Shapiro and those guys run around saying, oh, he's talking to an anti-Semite. That kid's a neo-Nazi. He's a fascist. He doesn't believe in the Holocaust. That if we say the exact same thing for him and say, what are you talking about? Oh, come on, guys. The real issue is our support for Israel. Right. That might, normal people who look at those clips might say, no, that sounds like he really is. Okay, again, he could be putting on an act. It's trolling. I get it. But yeah. I'm just saying tactically, I think it would be better if instead, just so people say, okay, well, Bob, give us something better. Instead of saying it that way, to just say, look, there are lots of people who clearly were not anti-Semitic and not even saying anything in the same zip code as that, and you guys use the same smear tactics, and so this is your go-to card. And you know what? If you don't want, anti-Semites in this space, then maybe you should stop scaring away respectable people. So it's your own behavior that causes this vacuum, so only someone like a Nick Fuentes who has nothing to lose can come in and talk about these issues. So don't be surprised. You kind of created this. Yeah. So sort of a subtle difference, but I think, an important one.
And moreover, if it wasn't for their bad behavior and smearing and labeling a bunch of non-anti-Semites, Nick Fuentes probably doesn't exist. That's his origin story. That's what Ben Shapiro did, because he was questioning, our relationship with Israel. And he's like, anybody that questions a Jewish person as to having dual loyalty is a, classic anti-Semite. And Nick Fuentes is like, what? And he's 17 years old at the time. As I said, I watched your entire breakdown, and I am sincere when I say I thought it was very thoughtful. I actually have a clip that I want to play for you, because this gives kind of the counter argument to the idea.
It's not me denying the Holocaust, is it?
No, that would be hilarious, but no, it's not that.
You could use AI.
Yeah. So a couple days ago, or maybe it was a week ago, I don't know how long, there was this moment with Dave Portnoy, who is Barstool Sports guy, and this is what happened.
I like it. Hey, fuck the Jews! Fuck you, Dave Portnoy!
Not cool.
Why you coming the camera, buddy?
All right. So there's this kid who says F the Jays and throws coins at Dave Portnoy. Obviously an egregious thing to do, not particularly violent, but still, very, very shitty and not a good sign for our culture. I will agree with that. But I want you to hear what Nick Fuentes had to say about this.
Okay.
This kind of thing is really a problem. And before anybody says I got the call or, somebody put me up to this, we do have to be very careful here. Because this is nothing other than what you could accurately describe as just verbal abuse. Going up to somebody and saying, fuck that person in public and saying, fuck you, that actually doesn't change anything. It's rude. It is disorderly. This is not how we're supposed to behave. I don't think that we can hold a society together if this is what it's going to turn into. And I don't think that's any type of civilized way to live, that people should be getting screamed at or heckled or punched or beat up. I do actually believe in civility. And I think that's what America's about. I think that's Christian. And so I would caution everybody, because don't get me wrong, I don't like Dave Portnoy. I think he's a poser. I think he's an asshole. I think he's a traitor. But if I saw him in the street, I wouldn't run up on him and yell, fuck you. Honestly, I wouldn't confront him at all. And if I did, I would be polite. I don't think that's the right thing to do. I don't think that's the right way to conduct ourselves, and I can't approve of it.
I know you're, big into nonviolence, as am I. And I think that the obvious claim that he's making there is one that is relatively Christian ethos, that you don't want to be aggressing on your fellow man and you don't want to be verbally assaulting or physically assaulting them. And I just wanted to contend with the argument that many people have made because of the clip that you did play on your show, which is when I think he was 18 years old at the time, where he's doing the whole oven cookie thing.
Right.
He's just not that guy. There is additional nuance to him. That doesn't mean that he's not a white nationalist. I think it's fair to describe him that way. But I do think that in terms of calling him a Nazi, someone who's actually interested in vicious political violence and pogroms or whatever, I just don't think that's accurate. And I think that the nuance on this actually does matter, because not because I'm trying to get people to support him, but because he has a tremendous amount of support. That's just the truth. He's got millions of people, young men in particular, that really, look up to him at this point. And that ideology is not going away. So my contention is that having discussions with those same audience members or with Nick himself is to our benefit. And I think that the energy that his movement brings, this kind of infusing a fight back into young men in this country, is a good thing. It's a healthy thing, and it's something that we need. And it's something that libertarians actually lack to a large extent. So I see it as, in many ways, a positive sign. And I know a lot of libertarians, view it as purely a negative. So I don't know. I guess I just have a very nuanced take on this entire Groyper movement. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are after I ranted.
Sure. Okay, well, thanks for that. I guess I would ask your viewers, because I've encountered some fans of Nick, and they come with as much understanding and grace as you're giving Nick in his statements over the years. Please also don't assume I'm saying something I'm not. And so to be clear,
right,
I had no problem with Dave or Glenn Greenwald or Tucker having Nick on their show, and I don't even have a problem that they didn't say, hey, you're a naughty boy. I realized that would be pointless. What would be the point of doing that? So, no, that, again, I had a very mild thing. I guess I'd put it this way. It's not a coincidence that the New York Times picked the most badass photo of Nick Fuentes they could find, like James Dean, and saying the new leader of the right. Yep. The left totally wants it to be conventional wisdom now that Nick Fuentes just took over.
He's the ideal
And so I'm
foil.
saying it's worth thinking through. Now, that doesn't mean just because they say something, therefore we shouldn't say it. But I'm saying think through why they want to say that, and that's in their interest in terms of the next election, where to frame it.
I totally
and so that's why I
think
just
that's
think
fair.
we should be a little bit cautious and not just give it to him on a silver platter and say, oh, yeah, we're basically Nick Fuentes now.
Well, see, this is the other point of contention between you and I, is that, you took the screenshot of James Lindsay posting my video that opens with a segment from Nick Fuentes. And because it was a screenshot that you showed, it shows, James Lindsay says, I tried to warn you about these people. And he's talking about me, and he's talking about the anti-war right. But if you're actually on Twitter and you see that post, the video is playing underneath it. And what's being said, as you said, there's really nothing to disagree with. It's like a pure America First message. So my point is this. Regardless of what we do, James Lindsay has been calling us the woke right and basically accusing us of this for years, despite the fact that it was never true. And I was not in any way defending Nick Fuentes years ago. So my point is, like, this is what they do. Ron Paul, the sweetest man on the planet. He wants to grab the neck of a Jew, according to Ben Shapiro. And then you got, Pat Buchanan and so many others that have been smeared with this when it's just obviously not true. So I'll just be straight with you. I'm not interested in playing their game. I'm not interested in trying to walk on eggshells to make sure that they don't misattribute my beliefs to Nick Fuentes and his audience. I'm going to just speak my mind, say what I actually believe, and kind of ride this wave and see where it ends up. But I'm not going to change my behavior to try and prevent bad actors from acting badly, because they're going to do that regardless. They have already decided. I mean, the Mises Caucus and myself were already written up by the SPLC years ago. And it's like, we're just genuine libertarians, like non-interventionists, anti-war people. And we're always labeled as being, hateful bigots and racists.
I should give credit to the great Bob Murphy, who talked about this on his podcast this week. And what's happened here is, especially on the right, but everywhere, all across the political spectrum, anyone who has the slightest problem with Zionism or with Zionist power and influence in the United States is immediately condemned as a Nazi and an anti-Semite. And I am saying this up front, quite honestly, I have never watched Nick Fuentes' show from beginning to end. I've seen a few clips. I think it's pretty clear that he's essentially the result of what you could have bet on anyway. That if you keep saying that everyone who disagrees with Zionism is a Nazi who hates Jews, you're going to have a young man say, fine, that doesn't hurt me, and then go ahead and own that, and then beat that horse to death, which is what he's done, right? Is stake that out. And I saw him saying the other day, a clip of him, I think in context, of him saying, you say Hitler, 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 every time anyone says anything about any of these issues. And then he says, but that word no longer has any power here. That was a long time ago. It has nothing to do with what's going on with us, and not like that. So what's happened is Zionism, which has a total kind of stranglehold and lock on the center of American politics, has marginalized anti-Zionism to the fringes, where now legitimate anti-Semites can claim to own it.
Well, I just think it's really funny. You're trying to have it both ways. Like, on the one hand, you're saying anti-Zionism is the most censored view in America, and then acknowledging that the entire Democratic Party is anti-Zionist. You're saying every person who criticizes Israel is labeled an anti-Zionist, and then you come out here and defend an actual anti-Semite, Nick Fuentes. No. And this is the problem, Pierce, is that this is exactly how it goes. They want to have it both ways.
What did I say? What did I say in defense of Nick Fuentes, lady?
You're out here saying that because that every person who is
I'm saying he's your escape hatch.
Of
That's
Zionism. No, but you
he's
said
your straw man. That's what he is.
You said that any person who is at all critical of Zionism becomes labeled an anti-Semite, and therefore Nick Fuentes has a seat at the table. Who is an actual
I didn't say that. You have to keep making up things I didn't say. I said people listen to him.
And it doesn't work on me anymore. Does that make sense?
It does. Can I say one more thing on that?
Of course.
Yeah, so I totally get everything you're saying. I just want to be clear. I'm not saying, hey, guys, I think James Lindsay had a point there, and, shouldn't we try to convince that? I'm talking about, like, put it to you this way. I have people I follow, and they follow me on Twitter, who like James Lindsay, and they get mad at Dave and whatever, and, like, they're cool on other stuff, and they like me, and so I was initially surprised. Like, how come everyone just doesn't think like me and is friends with all my... But I'm saying, so stuff like this, if all you really know about it is, wait, what's going on? And so here's the clincher. If it's not anything coming out of your mouth, and anything that Michael Heiss ever said, or that I ever said, or certainly Ron, over the years, and people calling us Holocaust deniers and neo-Nazi, that it's ludicrous. But I'm saying now on this one, though, if Ben Shapiro plays a bunch of clips, and the response from our team is, oh, come on, give me a break, guys, he's just screwing around, when those clips are way more intense than anything coming out of your or my mouth. So that's my modest point, is I think just we're giving that to them when we don't need to. So that's it.
Yeah, well, as I said 10 minutes ago or whatever, I think it's fair to describe Nick Fuentes as a white nationalist, and I'm not that. So I understand there is a distinction that needs to be made, but I also think it's unfair to call him a Nazi, because I don't think that that's accurate. So, I'm not trying to make him one of us or pretend I am one of him. I'm just trying to be honest about what I see. And I think that Shapiro is obvious, despite the fact that those clips are him honestly talking. Nick Fuentes, from 17 or 18 years old through 27, so basically a decade now, has done 3 hours live almost every night for a decade. That's an insane amount of talking and recording, and like way more than I'll probably ever do in my life. That's so much. And he is the young man who's appealing to young men. If you take the greatest hits of my stuff, especially when I was doing the comedy show, you could paint me in the worst light also. The reason I played that clip from Fuentes is that I think there is a concerted effort to paint him as the worst version of himself in his words, but not taking into consideration the more nuanced, more Christian worldview that I think he actually does believe and espouse oftentimes when he's being more serious. Like in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's murder, he has a very touching and very Christian ethos that he projected, and myself and Dave applauded him for that, because I thought it was really needed at that time. And then I think this is a good example too. Like, I don't like Dave Portnoy, but I don't want people throwing coins at him and saying terrible things like that. Like, that's not a country I want to live in either. So I just think it's oftentimes, whatever the worst version of him is supposed to be, it's not that, but he's also not this like purely great leader figure that many of his audience believes him to be. He's somewhere in between.
Yeah, and also, too, I will say, I don't know if you caught it, but on the most recent, as we're recording this episode of Provoked, Scott Horton and Daryl Cooper are going back and forth talking about this stuff. And I'm largely on Scott's team there. Like, he was kind of saying the same things I'm saying now with more vulgarity. But
that's what he does.
Yes. But Daryl made a good point, too, that I totally agree with, is say, look, Nick's out there, he's got his followers, and if he says, hey, guys, you got to stand down on that, like, they might listen to him because he's got credibility in their eyes. Whereas if, Scott Horton or me, say that to they're not going to, who are you guys? You're not willing to, you're just trying to, remain respectable, whereas Nick calls it like it is. So I totally get that. And so again, it's, if people want to talk to him, I think that's great to have dialogue just in general, journalists talking to anybody.
Yeah. And moreover, he's growing up. Like, I can see it in him from watching the old greatest hits of him saying the wildest shit, and then listening to him over the past couple of years, or seeing clips. I don't really watch his show in full. I don't have time for that. But it's just obvious to me that he's maturing, and he's realizing that he has a real position of power that just kind of came out of nowhere. He went from being the most hated, blacklisted man in the world to now having one of the biggest audiences in the country. And it's like, that comes with a lot of pressure, and I think that you start to think more deeply about what you have to say and try and iron out more of your ideology. So I think it's very healthy and very important that people like Tucker Carlson, like Dave Smith, have conversations with this guy. Like, that's obviously a good thing, and it's just so frustrating that the mentality from the actual woke right, the James Lindsay's, the Ben Shapiro's, is we're not just going to cancel you if you have a conversation with him. We're going to cancel people who won't condemn you for platforming Nick Fuentes. It's the most unhealthy way to go about this. And I know you don't agree with what they're doing. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying it's so dangerous. It creates the monster they're trying to slay. Like, I don't know why they can't see that. It's so obvious. Even with all of the suppression, he's become one of the biggest figures. So what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, what do you think? Oh no, we just need to go harder. We just need to double down more. We just need to blacklist him more. We just need to, not just steal his bank accounts, but put him in prison this time, as if that won't turn him into a martyr and ultimately uplift his entire movement into a truly radical, dangerous thing. And it's just like, I feel like I'm talking to a brick wall that people just can't see what I'm saying there.
To answer, though, that, is not to make it a rhetorical question on your part, that, I think James Lindsay would love it if Nick Fuentes said something crazy on his next show.
Oh, I agree.
So it's not that, don't you guys see you're creating this? And they say, if they were being honest, yes, we need him to exist to justify what we've been saying.
Yep. So. No, I agree. But I guess that's kind of my distinction between whether or not you're a good actor or a bad actor, is that if James is a genuine actor, like he's genuinely concerned about the rise of the alt-right, right? My opinion would be, well, then obviously you're going to want to sit down and have as many conversations with Nick Fuentes as you possibly can, because you're a college professor type that has studied these things, and you understand the rise of authoritarian figures and the pitfalls of that. And wouldn't you want to imbue that knowledge in him to try and prevent him from leading his audience down that path? And instead, his answer to the rise of an authoritarian right is to respond with authoritarianism and like basically, or soft power, I guess, but to suppress this conversation with this kid as much as humanly possible, and to do all of the things that you lamented when it came to the woke left, you're now doing to the right. And I just think it's such a dead end, and I think it's so dangerous. And it's funny because they think that Fuentes is indicative or reflective of all this danger that I can't see, but they can't see the danger of what they're doing themselves.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like it's, the analogy I used in my episode was with drug dealing, that, if you don't like drive-by shootings and overdoses and stuff, then don't make something illegal, because then that means it's only criminals and shoddy business practices that are in that space. So likewise here, that it's respectable people don't touch this stuff. And when he was telling that story to Tucker, Fuentes, about how, back in the day when he was talking about Jesus, it seems like, we're going to be whites are going to be a minority in this country. I mean, I can remember 10 years ago, like, you said anything like that, like just some people would have taken a step back away from you, like, I don't want to get cooties.
Right.
So I can understand, whereas now that's a very mainstream thing to say because stuff has changed. So I understand, what you're getting at in terms of, like, if things had happened differently, we wouldn't know his name right now, or he would have been sort of more conventional commentator, but this sort of pushed him in that direction. Or if he was going to go this way, the reason people flock to him is because no one else is talking about this stuff because everyone else is afraid.
Right. Well, and he's very gifted. So it's like, it's a dangerous combination. You took a really naturally talented orator with right-wing tendencies, and then you abused him very aggressively when he was very young. And it's like, well, you want to just kick him out of painter school next? Like, what are you guys trying to do here? And I just think this is the fight that we're in, though. It's like, this is going to be the real divide on the right, is like, are we an identitarian, non-interventionist right wing? Are we a non-identitarian, more of a America constitutionalist, libertarian, non-interventionist, individualist right wing, more of our camp? And it's like, I still believe that both of those sides are preferable to endless empire and woke progressivism and socialism and ultimately, destruction of the Constitution. And it's like, so I'm just going to continue to be in the fray on that conversation and try and win that argument that I think our worldview is preferential to that Nick Fuentes prescribes, and let the chips fall where they may. So I've got to run because hop on your buddy's show, Tom Woods.
Okay.
Yeah, but I really appreciate your thoughtful analysis and pushback, and I will absolutely keep it in mind. And maybe we can do this again in the future.
Okay. Thanks so much for having me, Clint.
Yep. Thank you, Bob. Talk soon.